Number 10. Per-Dagaton. Per-Dagaton was an enemy of the All-Star Squadron, obsessed with time travel after being an assistant to the Time Trust, a group of scientists who developed a time ray to go into the future and find an effective bombing defense for use in World War II. The All-Star Squadron was the United States' premier superhero team during World War II, as President Roosevelt asked all available heroes to unite, but only on the home front so that they wouldn't be influenced by Adolf Hitler's Spear of Destiny. The Justice Society of America finds the aforementioned bomb defense in the future, but it is later sabotaged by Per-Dagaton. Later, while he's employed by Project M, he meets a time-traveling robot named Mécanique, who asks for his aid in her new war against the All-Star Squadron. They fail in their attack and Mécanique's body is destroyed. But Dagaton salvages her head and keeps it at his side, and the two fall in love. Dagaton has time vision, which allows him to know what will happen in the near future, and he is also intangible due to being out of phase with his normal time. Here we see punches from the Flash go right through his intangible body. Hey guys, if you like these videos and you want to see some more, make sure you take a second to hit that like button.
And number 9, the Maestro. Alright, sometimes the future is bright, sometimes the future is imperfect. So seeing our heroes grow up on screen and on the page is a wonderful thing, usually, but what about the other characters like the Hulk living for a very, very long time? You gotta wonder what would happen to a guy like that, what happens to his brain, right? So making his first appearance in a vision in the Incredible Hulk Volume 2, Issue 401, the Maestro was the main antagonist in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect. So we gotta talk about it, okay? The story takes place about 100 years in the future after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction, which is kind of where we're heading now, I feel like. Definitely. An alternate future version of the Hulk, the Maestro, had been absorbing all of this nuclear radiation the entire time, and he ended up becoming the strongest thing on the planet, as if he wasn't already a badass before. So that means massive increases in strength and anger, plus the brains of Banner, made him arguably unstoppable. I mean, it's in the future, so clearly unstoppable. And it's terrifying too. I mean, Professor Hulk has to use Dr. Doom's time machine to go ahead in the future in order to defeat him. But the Maestro has tons of experience when it comes to the Hulk, being in the future and all, being the Hulk in the future. So it doesn't go well for Professor Hulk at all. I mean, he gets his neck snapped broken, right? So then the Maestro took him on a tour around the city in order to convince him that his ways were the best. And it was resolved when Professor Hulk brought Maestro back from the future to the moment the Hulk was created. He appeared right next to the gamma bomb test that started it all, and at the same time the Hulk was created, the Maestro was killed. It's like a ha-ha-ha thing. Time's confusing. It's very confusing.
Number 8. Arthur Zarko. Arthur was an evil genius, a scientist from the year 2262 who built a time machine hoping to escape the 23rd century and visit a more primitive period where he would more easily be able to steal some nuclear weapons. One day, Thor is busy helping the military test missiles, and Zarko appears in his time machine, stealing a bomb and escaping into the future. Thor winds up having to follow him to the year 2262 and recover the bomb, defeating the villain and then returning to the present. Later, when Thor has his powers reduced by Odin as punishment for marrying Jane Foster, Loki takes advantage of this opportunity and restores Zarko's memory. Zarko promptly goes back in time to fight Thor and get his vengeance, bringing this mining robot alongside for some extra muscle. Thor is unable to defeat them both and is forced to become Zarko's slave and help him rule back home in the 23rd century. Once Zarko takes control of the central computer of that world, Thor's vow to help Zarko is technically fulfilled, so Thor quickly dispatches him now that he doesn't have a robot protector, and then returns to his own time. And Odin, having witnessed all this, returns Thor to his full strength.
Number 7. Dr. Doom. Weirdly enough, in a way, Dr. Doom is also a villain from the future, as he does like to travel back to the past to enact some villainous plots. He traveled back in time to study with Morgan Le Fay, and he's also gone back in time as well with Iron Man to the period of Arthurian legend. One of his most iconic plots, in my mind as well, was when he wanted to use the Fantastic Four to help him steal Blackbeard's treasure by traveling back in time and recovering it, which seems like a really easy way to possibly mess up the timeline for a reward that somehow, I don't know, it doesn't really seem worth all that trouble. I know it's a chest of treasure, Doom, historical pirate treasure no less, but is it really worth possibly changing the future for? And messing with time? I don't know.
Number 6. Electro 2099. The regular version of Electro is kind of lame. Sure, he has some good moments, but he's a hot dog with no condiments next to the chili cheese dog that is Electro 2099. Regular Electro looks like one of Santa's elves, but this guy is hardcore, walking around looking like an electrified skeleton. This Electro is actually an android who, after being deemed unnecessary by his creators, was given to these other guys who tortured him for science until his obedience chip burned out and he gained sentience. As you can imagine, after all of this, he's a pretty angry dude. He joins the Sinister Six in 2099 and is later recruited by Venture into the terrorist organization known as the Fist in the year 2016. He once captured Sonny Frisco after following him through Parker Industries and defeating Captain America along the way. He's later stopped by Spider-Man, who uses wooden shields to negate his electric powers and then capture Electro. Now, with Electro imprisoned in a lab, they trick him into revealing the date of the Fist's planned attack on New York City and then deactivate him. It's a pretty quick and sad end to an epic villain who time travels.
Number 5, Maestro. In Avengers Endgame, we cut to 5 years in the future. Hulk is now smart, he's taking selfies, he's dabbing, he's hanging out with the team, but he's embarrassed by his past smashy version of himself from 2012's Avengers. We love growth, we love seeing a character change, but what if the Hulk had lived even longer on this planet? Well, that's where we get into the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect storyline. As the title suggests, the future is not so bright here. There are no flying cars, there's actually nothing really there. It's not a paradise at all. When we see the future Earth 9200, we're seeing a Hulk 100 years in the future as well. We find him after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction. So the Hulk, or rather the Maestro, was older, stronger, and scarier looking, all because he'd been absorbing all this nuclear radiation from the Earth. He became even more unstoppable and, of course, just super jaded, just super evil. He had to face a future version of Rick Jones at one point, and then he ended up losing a battle to said Smart Hulk as well. I wouldn't want to face any version of the Hulk at any time. I don't want to fight Smart Hulk, War Hulk, Horseman Hulk, or even Bruce Banner. I don't want to fight the scientist Bruce Banner.
Number 4, Nimrod. In an alternate future known as Days of Future Past, Sentinels rule over North America. The original Nimrod was built as an advanced prototype. He's a mutant hunting robot, built from technology derived from the original Sentinels. He follows Rachel Summers into the past and causes no end of trouble for the X-Men. Eventually, Nimrod is absorbed by the gigantic core Sentinel known as Master Mold, and the two travel together through a dimensional gateway that erases the identity of those who travel through it. So the two merge into a being called Bastion, a fully evolved Sentinel who has been destroyed and rebuilt using Nimrod's previous body several times. It's super weird and complicated like time travel stuff usually is, but personally I just can't get over the fact that his name is Nimrod.
Number 3, Immortus. Immortus is one of the most powerful enemies of the Avengers, who was actually revealed to simply be an alternate path that the villain Kang the Conqueror could have chosen. Because there is so much time travel in Kang's past, there are a lot of alternate reality versions and versions from future and past timelines floating around that sometimes even come into conflict with each other, in addition to also fighting heroes along the way. Immortus is one such alternate Kang self. Lord Immortus is what Kang would become while choosing to ally himself with the Timekeepers. He is virtually immortal, using advanced technology to dramatically slow the appearance of aging, and often spends his time traveling through it, fixing various issues with the timelines and maintaining them, which of course grants him a lot of power. Eventually, Immortus would be killed, but even after his supposed death, his corpse still played a key role in a few different plots. So even when Immortus was dead, he was still doing stuff, apparently.
Number 2, Professor Zoom. Arch nemesis to Barry Allen, the Flash, Professor Zoom is a time traveler who wants nothing more than to destroy everything the Flash has ever stood for. He is remarkably powerful with a brilliant mind and super speed. He's been affiliated with various groups, including the Secret Society of Supervillains. He is super nefarious, having gone back in time multiple times to get what he wants, even once preventing his own brother from being born. He was once in love with a reporter, but her eventual rejection left him so scorned that his future self went back in time and traumatized the reporter as a child, rendering her mute and causing her to be institutionalized. There are honestly many more examples of this guy's heartlessly evil ways, but I think you get the idea. This is one super evil time traveling jerk, and a perfect fit for the number 2 spot on this list.
And finally, number 1, Kang the Conqueror. Nathaniel Richards, making his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964, so old. Kang has seen many centuries. His powers allow him, of course, to travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with all these badass weapons to help him do so. That plus, of course, he's a super genius, which means it's a pretty stacked combo. Kind of OP if you ask me. He was born in the 30th century of Earth 6311, which is a world where the Dark Ages never happened. Yeah, the time travel stuff doesn't come without consequence though, because as Kang travels more and more through time, he creates time-displaced duplicates, which are just so easy to keep track of. So we love those. Kang is on the way in the MCU as well, and he's being played by Jonathan Majors. And with the whole time variance authority stuff coming into play with the Loki show, things are gonna get so confusing. He actually once ruled over Egypt, believe it or not, as their new pharaoh, named himself Rama-Tut as well. He was actually there looking for another time-traveling baddie, and Sabanur, aka Apocalypse. Yeah, he wanted to make Apocalypse his hair, which is just a great thing to do, for sure. Spooky stuff. You don't want to mess around with this guy. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Abra, aka Citizen Abra. He began his magical days as a Flash villain, first appearing in comics in The Flash issue 128. He's from the future, of course, like most of these guys are, but it's a future where, sadly, magic shows aren't a thing anymore. Yeah, sorry, David Blaine. Gotta get a new job. He's from the 64th century, and technology has become so advanced that pulling a rabbit out of a hat just simply won't cut it anymore. I heard about the time machine powered by M-metal. He just had to get his glittery magician hands on it. It was only capable of one trip, so Abra snuck into the laboratory and shot back in time to the 20th century, where magicians were still celebrities, like Chris Angel or David Blaine or David Copperfield or, you know, the other ones. He would use technology from his timeline well beyond what we're capable of and then blow our minds in these magic shows. The shows were going well at first until people got bored, then they were actually more interested in this new statue being built in town, so he figured the next logical way of getting attention was to start stealing things, starting with this fancy new statue. He kept stealing, and he kept stealing after that, and he kept using his future tech to evade capture, so when it comes to magicians, Abracadabra is very committed to the craft, in the future or the past. Number 9. Gorr, the God Butcher. The God Butcher will be played by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder sequel, and yes, he is a time-traveling menace as well. He made his first appearance in Thor God of Thunder issue 2. He was born on a planet with no name, which is always a great sign. Gorr lost his parents when he was very young, and he was told to pray to these gods, because they would always make things better, these glorious gods. And then after getting a wife and son, death kept looming over, and he lost both of them as well. Really tragic stuff. So now he's a little bit more than upset at these gods. He wants them to answer or to pay, one of the two. With the all-black Necrosword powers, he heads out for revenge on these gods, but in the past. He would use the Pool of Forever to travel back in time and make these attacks happen. He would use the Pool of Forever to go back in time and then attack all these gods when they were babies, right? So it took different versions of Thor from different timelines just to put a stop to Gorr the God Butcher. So with this new Thor movie coming out, including Natalie Portman, Mjolnir, Lady Sif, I feel like it's gonna be a cosmic headache and do some time stuff in there as well. But in Taika, we trust. It's kind of like when Rhodey suggested getting rid of Thanos when he was younger by, you know, Gorr the God Butcher is basically that mentality, but 10 times worse. And with powers. Number 8, Timothy Drake. The Red Robin, aka Tim Drake, first entered comics in Batman 436. He was a young boy who saw the Flying Graysons show live in person. He even received kind words from Dick Grayson, and Dick dedicated that act to Tim that night. How lovely. Now, of course, this was moments before Dick's parents, John and Mary, tragically died during this act. A night Tim would never forget, especially when he witnessed the Caped Crusader himself, Batman, consoling Dick Grayson afterwards. So years later, when Tim was 9, it was Batman and Robin taking down the Penguin, and Robin did this quadruple somersault, the only flip that could be performed by a Grayson, and then he connected the dots. He's like, oh, so you're him and you're him. Got it. Tim followed them around for a while, and then after Jason's death, Tim suited up himself as the third Robin. But in the Titans Tomorrow storyline, we see the Teen Titans travel to the 31st century to assist the Legion of Superheroes, and when they return, they accidentally end up 10 years in their future. So they meet older, darker future versions of themselves, including Timothy Drake, now going by Savior. This version of Tim is ruthless. He even carries around with him Joe Chill's gun to help get the job done. So when the team gets back to their real timeline, they swear to never become their dark counterparts, and they split up. But, like I said earlier, this split up is actually what ends up causing the dark versions of themselves to happen in the first place. Time! You can't mess with time, that's it. The Titans Tomorrow storyline is definitely one you need to check out. We love dark, evil versions of our heroes. We can't get enough of them. And number 7, Deadpool. Yes, Wade Wilson kills the Marvel Universe, and it is gloriously glory and gory. Deadpool of Earth 12101, that is. So this issue was released August 2012, and I mean, just the front cover, you know you want to take a peek in. So what's the story here? Well, the X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to, you know, heal his insanity, but of course the Doctor wasn't too good at handling such a task from such a man. The Doctor being Psycho Man, of course. So yeah, he brainwashed Wade in hopes to shut down all of his inner voices, and it worked. But the only downside, those voices were now replaced with other voices, and these ones were encouraging him to, well, of course, kill everybody in the Marvel Universe. Love it. It's like when you get a song stuck in your head, but it's like, kill everyone in the Marvel. You know how that goes. So right off the bat, the series pulls you in, right? It opens up with the Fantastic Four facing off with Wade. And he kind of kills them all. You know, like Reed Richards' face is all rubbery, it's like melting. Sue has to watch Deadpool kill Johnny before meeting her own demise. And that's just the first few pages alone. Then the Watcher ends up taking us back to the beginning and how it all started with Dr. Psycho and all that jazz. So it's fun, you get a little peek at what happens and then you wrap it back in time. Kind of like a little Tarantino flick. And it's honestly a really fun run. It's not for the faint of heart, but definitely fun. Number 6, Reverse Flash. Eobard Thawne made his debut in Flash issue 139, titled The Black Flash. He was the OG Reverse Flash. He was born in 2451 when his parents genetically engineered him, because that's the thing you do in the future, and you can engineer your kids to look and be funny and cute, I guess. Okay, cool. But he lacked the social skills in this time to make his parents truly proud, so they decided, you know what, another son may be the key. A new best friend, great idea, you know, they can pair up and talk and be friends and stuff. Okay, cool. I grew up with siblings, I get it. That second son's name was Robert. He spent so much time trying to keep an eye on Robert and to make his parents proud and to like babysit him, that down the road his application to study the Speed Force at the Flash Museum was rejected. He was too busy, he couldn't even study. So he studied it illegally. But he was caught by his brother, who was now an officer in the Science Police. This guy is interesting and a little confusing. So a future version of Eobard traveled through time and prevented his brother from being born, and then he was able to study and was in turn this time around admitted to the Flash Museum. Great. But then when Professor Drake was on the verge of proving the existence of the Speed Force, Eobard has trained his whole life for this, so he wanted to collab, but Drake said no. He wanted to do it solo. So he traveled back in time again and eliminated Professor Drake from the equation. So next time around, there's no Drake, there's no problem. Now Eobard is the professor at the Flash Museum and was nicknamed Professor Zoom. Reverse Flash is responsible for the death of Barry Allen's mother and his wife Iris West. He just rips timelines and the Flash's life to pieces. That's his whole thing.
Number 5, Nimrod. Nimrod has become even more intense in the last few years, managing to make the overall silly sounding name of Nimrod strike fear into the hearts of mutants and X-Men fans everywhere. Nimrod, despite actually often being associated with the idea of someone being inept here in North America, is actually a word in a literary sense that can mean a skillful hunter, which actually makes it, I think, a very fitting name for Nimrod. But yeah, I didn't know that even until I was writing this, and then I was like, oh. Does sound silly though, you Nimrod. Skillful hunter is definitely what Nimrod themselves has become associated with in terms of all the crazy stuff they've done. The Nimrod of Days of Future Past, Earth 811, is a type of sentinel that originally traveled back in time to fulfill its mission of destroying the X-Men. In a past future viewed in Powers of X, we also learned that Nimrod has the potential to be the end of mutant kind and humankind as we know it. Humans basically become tools to be used by Nimrod to destroy mutants, and mutants are all but extinct in this future.
Number 4, Time Trapper. First appearing in Adventure Comics 317, Time Trapper was introduced to readers as a warlord in the far future who prevents the Legion of Superheroes from traveling into their future with this iron curtain of time. The Time Trapper's main goal basically was to steal this weapon that could absorb every energy in the universe, just this Dyson vacuum full of energy called the Concentrator. Now the team caught wind of this Time Trapper when they could no longer jump more than 30 days in the future. They're like, okay, something's up, there's some higher powers preventing us from being badass. He resides comfortably at the end of time, accompanied by his servants, the Glorith of Baldur. Time Trapper can age anybody he wants, either a couple years or straight to the ashes and bones part. In Action Comics 385, Time Trapper created a temporal force barrier in order to seal a time-traveling Superman away from the 20th century. He's that powerful. Number 3, Gore. So it was recently announced that the God Butcher himself will be played by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder movie. So I figured this would be a good time to play catch up and see what to expect. Gore made his first appearance in Thor God of Thunder issue 2. Born on a planet with no name, always a great sign, Gore lost his parents at a very young age and was told to pray to the gods, because they would always make things better, you know how gods be. And then after getting a wife and son, death kept looming over, and he lost both of them as well. So now he's a little upset at said gods, and he wants them to pay. And with the all-black Necro Sword powers, he headed out for revenge. Now, this sword is a pretty big deal. It was actually built by Null, the almighty symbiote god, and he took out a lot of gods with it, all but of course, Thor. We got Gore Thor and Thor 4. So he uses the Pool of Forever to make his time travel attacks on the gods and stay ahead of the game. He also used it to travel back in time before the universe to kill a baby elder god, little baby boy elder god, and then steal its heart. Sick. Then he used it to go ahead in time to the future to Earth 14412, and I hope the MCU doesn't do too much time travel here because my head already hurts with these new timelines coming. I can't even keep track. What's going on? Number 2, Chronos. If you do the crime, you're doing the time. But if you have enough time, you can plan said crime out in detail, and then maybe you just won't get caught next time. David Clinton first entered DC Comics with the Atom issue 3. He's mainly a villain for Ray Palmer, aka the Atom. Now he was a criminal his entire life, and finally when he was arrested, he was thrown in the slammer, where he had time to think about everything that he's done, all the reasons why he got caught, why his plans didn't work. But maybe he had a bit too much time. He reflected on his past crimes and what he would have done differently if he had planned it better, and then he used his skills and obsessions with timepieces to work non-stop in the prison workshop, where he learned about clocks, time, the mechanisms within. He learned about everything. So when his sentence was finally up, he was released and then became a time-traveling villain. He used all these time-inspired weapons, like an exploding hourglass, a wristwatch with blades instead of hands, and a device that could slow time down. Going by the new name Chronos, in the DC animated universe, Chronos used these devices to go back in time and steal rare relics from the past. At one point, he actually tried stealing a utility belt from the Justice League's watchtower, but when he was interrupted, he made a break for it through the time vortex, and Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman followed him back. Not this time, Chronos. Literally, not this time. Maybe the next one. And finally, number 1, Kang. Kang the Conqueror. As Loki gets closer to wrapping up, we're starting to see some higher powers at play here. The Time Lords were just androids. Loki was banished to a realm full of other Lokis. We're not really sure who's calling the shots yet, but signs are pointing to Kang. Jonathan Majors is already set to play the time-traveling villain in the next Ant-Man film, so let's do a quick refresh on him. Kang the Conqueror, aka Nathaniel Richards, made his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964. Kang has seen many centuries. He can travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with weapons that could take on any superhero from any timeline that he chooses. He's super powerful, and it sure helps when he travels with armies. That often does a trick. So he discovered time travel tech from the 31st century developed by Dr. Doom, and being a descendant of Reed Richards with that brain power, he figured out a way to make it work to his advantage. He traveled back in time initially to become Pharaoh Rama-Tut, but once he returned to his 31st century, it was now just a wasteland. So he figured, okay, now I'm going to go all the way back and just rule Earth to prevent said destruction from happening. I feel like Kang is one episode away. We're so close. I can feel it in my soul.
Number 10, Savior. Savior is a future version of Tim Drake who becomes Batman. Doesn't sound so villainous, right? Well, this future Bat version of Timothy Drake takes things a little too far, which is what makes him more villainous than heroic, despite taking up his own version of the cape and the cowl. Drake in the Titans Tomorrow reality is known by the vigilante codename of Savior, and has gone to extremes to do what he believes is right, meaning that Drake doesn't hold back and kills villains or even heroes who get in his way, eliminating them permanently. Drake and the world were seemingly transformed by a crisis event. In addition, Batman was also killed by Batwoman, which heavily shaped the life of Tim Drake in this reality, who would then do what he swore he would never do and continue on the Batman legacy in Bruce's place. Number 9, King Thanos. King Thanos is an alternate version of Thanos who hails from a pretty terrible future where he has successfully destroyed almost all life in the universe in an attempt to win the favor of Lady Death. In this universe, Frank Castle also becomes Ghost Rider after being killed and then making a deal to become Ghost Rider, returning to Earth in an attempt to avenge the fallen heroes of Earth, only to return too late, with Earth pretty much being decimated by Thanos already. As Ghost Rider, Castle lost his mind from loneliness, but would later have no other choice left but to become the Herald of King Thanos. King Thanos actually has a few people left to kill and needs help, so he actually sends Cosmic Ghost Rider, aka Frank Castle, back in time for a younger version of himself to basically help him in his final battle. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more time travel, future-based lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. CHRONOS. CHRONOS is a somewhat confusing character in DC continuity because there are multiple versions of him, and this confusion isn't entirely the fault of alternate futures or time travel either. It's actually more to do with the trajectory of the DC main continuity. CHRONOS, not to be confused with Chronos, no H, back in the New Earth continuity was known to be a clock-obsessed villain of Ray Palmer's Captain Atom. However, his clock obsession would soon develop into an obsession to perfect the means of time travel, and this obsession would translate to his Prime Earth continuity counterpart, who was an agent of Argus specializing in, you guessed it, time travel. There is also another version of Chronos, which is an entirely different person, Walker Gabriel, who found Clinton's tech and then more used it to become an anti-hero instead of like a full-blown villain.
Number 7. Ultron. The Avengers Age of Ultron storyline is a lot better than the MCU's version of that. The comic Age of Ultron has better time travel stuff than the movie Endgame does, honestly. I mean, Wolverine goes back in time, he tries to kill Hank Pym so that Ultron's never created, but while he's there he has to talk to other Avengers who are also back in time on a different mission. It's wild, it's a great time. It starts off with New York City in ruins. Spider-Man is zipping around the city, all these heroes are missing or they're dead, and the only way for the city to survive this apocalypse is by offering superheroes to Ultron, who just rules everything. So She-Hulk and Luke Cage are amongst these survivors, and they have the plans basically to just go in willingly, and then once they're inside, they're gonna break everything apart because they're super strong. But then when they get there, it's not even Ultron that's running the show, it's actually Vision. The Vision is being used as a conduit from future Ultron, so he's safe, you can't just go and punch him and then everything's fine. He's in the future, he's safe, he knows what's gonna happen. We're kind of screwed. We can't punch our way out of this. We have Ultron already on top. Ultron is actually barely in the story, funny enough, but the stakes start off raised, so you feel anxious the entire time reading it. It's a great time travel story. Definitely check it out.
Number 6. Monarch. Monarch is another villain from the future who actually, it turns out, was originally a hero. I love these reveals, especially when you are the hero finding out that you become the villain. Gasp. Monarch is actually Hank Hall, who ends up becoming a villain in a dystopian future after his partner Dove dies. For those who don't know, Hank Hall is the hero Hawk of the superhero duo Hawk and Dove. Hank wouldn't be the only hero to become known as the future villain Monarch. In fact, it seems likely much of the villainy behind Monarch comes from the suit that Hank and later Captain Atom wear while donning that mantle. In fact, in the case of Captain Atom, it seems the suit is very much to blame here. Suit making people evil and crazy.
And number 5, Dr. Doom. Making his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 5, Victor Von Doom is the main villain for the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, and he's been on the big screen a couple of times, one of which we don't like to talk about. We don't talk about that one. He's a big deal, hence why he's close to being number 1. He's one of the most popular Marvel villains ever. I mean, where to start with this guy? I mean, he fought Mephisto, okay, so he fought the devil, and he also has a pretty wild family history. I mean, his mother, a Latvian woman, liked to get close to demons, maybe a little too close. And then after Victor was born, she would attempt to tap into the demonic powers herself, and her clan wasn't a fan of that. So him and his dad got out of Dodge. We don't want that witch mom in here, no siree. So sadly, his dad froze to death in order to protect him from the cold. So then he figured he'd try this demonic power tapping himself, and then with no luck, he returned to his own brain power and then soon met Reed Richards. Time travel is bound to happen with the brains like him. He traveled back in time using the time platform in Castle Doom, and he went to 2011 AD and got in close with Morgan Le Fay. But thankfully the Fantastic Four showed up like, nope, sorry, guy's a huge dick in the future, don't mind us, we'll just scoop him up and get out of here.
Number 4. extant. The thing about time traveling characters is that you can have a few different versions of them, whether that be in one single timeline or across multiple timelines. In the case of extant though, we are fortunately keeping things pretty linear thus far on this list. Extant is actually the name that Hank Hall took up after his Monarch persona, and if you thought Monarch was bad, Hank Hall's extant is arguably worse. Extant is Monarch, but now not only advanced, but with the ability to time travel. He teams up with Hal Jordan's Parallax, and the two villains plan to take control of time itself so that they might manipulate it as they so desire, altering reality itself.
Number 3. Bishop. Lucas Bishop is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal is to travel back in time to stop this unknown factor amongst the X-Men. Okay, so he comes from this dark future and he goes back in time to change it because something bad happens. There's some bad mutant, okay? But this happens where most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch, and then this one child, Hope Summers, was born, the first mutant born since M-Day. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back in time in the first place. This kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop thinks the only way to save his future is to travel back in time and take out Hope Summers as a child, but he fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating this new future where Cable is remembered as the hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was actually remembered as the villain. So he was the villain in his own story, and he didn't even know it.
Number 2. Professor Zoom. Professor Zoom is Eobard Thawne, the main villain of Barry Allen's The Flash, who traveled back in time just to mess with the Flash's life. That's how much he hates him. He has also been known as Reverse Flash before in the comics. Eobard Thawne hails from the future of the 25th century in DC Comics, being a very fast speedster powered by the negative speed force. There is much that Eobard can do and accomplish as a villain. Aside from traveling back in time and to other dimensions, he can use his super speed to not only be super fast, but also be super powerful in battle, as his speed also inherently gives him super strength. He also possesses the ability to heal and the ability to manipulate molecules, allowing him to phase through things. Despite being a villain in the New Earth continuity, Thawne even used his molecular manipulation powers at one point to save the DC universe, which I think makes you pretty powerful in my mind. Number 1. Kang the Conqueror. While Kang might look a little silly in the comics with his, his purple helmet and his floating time chair, he is not someone who should be underestimated. Kang hails from the 30th century, where he is believed to either be the descendant of Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, or Mr. Fantastic, aka Reed Richards. He is known as Nathaniel Richards in his original future reality of Earth 6311, where he hails from. In fact, a young Nathaniel Richards would go on to become Iron Lad while running from his future self Kang, only to learn that he actually needed to become Kang, or would actually kind of risk the destruction of time and the multiverse itself. That is maybe the most powerful element of Kang. He's like a Marvel absolute, and even though young Nathaniel wanted to become a hero and in essence defeat Kang, he had to accept his destiny or risk destroying multiple universes that have been shaped by a version of Kang and his actions. Kang is basically like integral. If you don't have Kang, everything dies, but if you have Kang in the reality, he's probably gonna try to mess with you. It's like, there's no good answer to Kang.